About recording. Okay, so we're going to exit this for just a second and go over to Blackboard. I wanted to show you those couple of tabs if you didn't have a chance to watch that video, or if you did watch the video and we're still kind of like, I don't know what he's talking about. So I'm going to go through just a couple of new tabs. Announcements, syllabus are the same. There's a course calendar tab there that'll open up and give you the week-to-week breakdown of what we're doing. So there you go, Amber. So if you do, you didn't even have to go to Dollar Tree and buy any green screen paper, did you? I won't ask the secret, so I just assume that there's anyway. You can tell me later. So anyhow, this stuff here week by week. So again, if you want to work ahead, but look ahead, or if you're going to be gone or something, that's there for you. And then weekly units, that hasn't changed. So let's see, weekly slides, that one is a little bit different. That's going to have the link. I didn't put week 1 in here. I can and I will. In fact, let me make myself a note to do that. Just for because some of you still have some week 1 stuff to do. So I do want to put those slides in there. So under the weekly slides tab, it'll be a link. So this week's slide or link will take you to this week's slides. And again, it's a PowerPoint. You can download it or you can open it with Google Slides. And there are a couple things I want to show you guys too. It's on the agenda for tonight. If we go back real quick, Google Doc, sharing, and Dropbox. I do want to go through a couple of things. There were a handful of emails from both classes about those things. So some of you are using a Mac or Apple to do your stuff. So there may be some of the Microsoft stuff that doesn't jive. But Google Docs does. But I do want to show you how to work that. So anyway, there's now a weekly slides tab that's just going to be a link to the slides, and then there's a Zoom class sessions tab that's going to have all of the recorded sessions. So we've got the week 1 folder in there that has all 4 morning and evening sessions from last week. Again, those are the YouTube recorded sessions. Okay, week 2, that's going to have this morning's session in there for you as well. And then after tonight, your session will be in there. Let's see. This section is entirely new. So these are tabs that are going to directly take you to being able to do drop boxes or take exams without necessarily having to go back into the weekly unit. So remember, you have 4 things to do every week: Padlets, some sort of lab assignment, portfolios, and then the exam. So you have 4 things each week. And so you can find the links to those under each of these tabs. So if I click the Padlet links, you're going to see the hyperlinks that'll take you out to the Padlet. So this will continue to populate throughout the semester. So you'll end up with 14 Padlets, believe it or not, in here. Okay, so if I click week 2 Padlet, it'll pop me right out into a new window into the week 2 chemistry Padlet. Okay. Let's see, lab assignment drop boxes, the second item you do each week. Okay, again, it shows up with the direct link to those drop boxes. So week 2 lab assignment, we click that and it'll open right up. Looks just like your Dropbox that you would find under the units tab. So again, just make things a little bit quicker for you to access once you're ready to take those on. Portfolio drop boxes, then it's going to look the exact same. You're going to have your, as we go, you'll have your 14 portfolios in there. And again, just like the previous lab assignment Dropbox we just looked at, chemistry portfolio, week 2 Dropbox. This one's a little shorter. This unit this week is a little bit shorter. It's not quite as intense. So next, I think generally things kind of work out that way in A&P. Usually by about week 4 or so, things are settled in really well for students. It's a lot more macro scale or big scale, looking at what bone is it and that type of thing. What muscle is it? What part of the heart? What part of the brain? Those types of things. So anyway, this is the Dropbox for the portfolio for this week. All right, and then lastly, the exams hyperlink tab. Again, once you're ready, click on those and open those up and take those when you're ready. And again, this exam 1 is the original one. You'll find I'll put the extra credit one under there as well. You'll also be able to find it under weekly units. I made a couple of adjustments as well, and it'll continue to be this way moving forward for the most part. I think there'll be a few weeks where I'll have some extra stuff in there, but week 1, I'm going to go in there just for a split second. I don't want to bring up any PTSD or anything from last week. And if this is a trigger, then close your eyes, close your ears, and don't listen for a few minutes. But I don't think it shouldn't be. I hope it's not. But anyway, this there's a lot. It's bulky, right? There's a lot of stuff. It's go up and down and moving around. It's like, eesh, where do I begin? It's kind of black and white, which is fine, but there's a lot there to take. So moving forward, I toned it down a little bit. I think you'll be glad to know. So I removed a lot of the fluff and just put the directions for the section. It still has the engage, comprehend, practice, apply. That's extremely important, and I believe that breaks things down in a kind of a chronological pattern for you to do, at least a recommended pattern. So again, you're going to find the Padlet link there, which you also would find over here under this Padlet link. I made an outline this week for chapter 2. So if we click on that, that'll pop open in a new window. And again, this is a good time now let me zip over here. I'm going to talk briefly about Google Docs and sharing. So I opened up this outline, several items, and I see. So yeah, as you follow along today too, yeah, feel free to click as I click. Absolutely, but you're going to find. Of course, shell doesn't work. Is it just me? I have to enter through the syllabus. Oh, interesting. I don't know. I'll ask that out loud. When you guys, I'll tell you what I'll do. Yeah, it should take you out. How do you guys get in here? Do you get in through the link? I know I think I sent out a link and an announcement at one point, so you might have that in your email. Maybe you go into the course, download Zoom separately, and enter the meeting number. So yeah, I can type that in, so you can have that, or I can enter through the original email you sent. So I don't know why it's not working, Stephanie. I'll take a look at that. Let me take a note. I'll look at that after class and see if there's something not clicking. Okay. So the Zoom tab, let me see if I click that in here. Zoom meeting room. Upcoming meetings. Yeah, I see what's going on. Okay, yep, I'll fix that. I know exactly what's going on. What I need to do is fix this link to be something other than what it is. Obviously. Anyway, Zoom meeting room link. So I'll fix that, because yeah, that should take you right in. Zoom meeting room link. Fix. Yeah, I think I have a pretty good idea of why it's that way. Okay. Enter through the ID number. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Awesome. So a variety. Well, yeah. Okay. I'll fix that or work on it. I can't guarantee anything, but I think I have an idea what the problem is. Let's see. Outline. Oh, so outline for chapter 2. So you've noticed a lot of items that I put in are you can also access through Google Docs. Um, Once you get into Google Docs, remember from Blackboard, you're getting what you're seeing here is and what you would see from your computer is my copy. It's a read-only copy. So and again, I think I mentioned this last week, but I do want to emphasize it again because I did get a couple of emails. If you want your own copy of this exact thing to be able to type into, just go over to File and click Make a Copy. And then, you know, it'll ask you if you want to name it. You can change the name too. Usually I just click OK. Whatever that says looks good to me. OK. And now I can change it from here. Um, and now this is Mike. I'm Joe for a second. So Joe, I just clicked on Mr. Yoakum's document. It opened it up. Clicked file, clicked make a copy. All right, sweet. Now I have my own as Joe. I can go in here and change the name of it if I want. This is like a homework assignment. You would maybe come up and type your last name or something. And from here, you can start typing, do whatever you want. And then once you're ready to submit it or share it, you want to come up and click the share in the upper right corner. And from there, it'll give you a couple of options. You can just you can add me to it. So just type in my name. That's my Gmail, but I'm Joe. So, and this is Mr. Yoakum. So I type that in, and um, I don't know if you want to have me as editor. I mean, you can. You may want to, so I can, when I grade it, I can make notes. I would make them. I would highlight stuff, or you know, circle stuff, whatever. So that's really all you have to do, and then click send. Okay. You can also, so that's how you can get it to me. And a couple of you did that, and I appreciate that. Sends an email and invites me to view it, and that's it. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay. And again, it's yoakumk@gtc.edu. Once you've done it once, once you've shared it once, it'll just populate it just by typing in the letter Y, I think. So So anyway, that's one way to do it. You can also copy the link and send me the link in an email. But if you do that, then you have to change the restrictions down here, change link to GTC. This is something I think we talked about too, to anyone with the link. And then you can copy the link, send it that way. Okay. So, but again, you don't have to do it that way if you don't want. You can just do it so it sends me an email. Okay, so that's it for Google Docs. It works that way for Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google whatever, any of these apps that are comparable to what you would find with that Microsoft Office package. So let's see. We're cruising. So engage, outline, and then comprehend. Of course, will take you to OpenStax Chapter 2, as well as the key terms. This Zoom classroom is another way. I'm not sure if that one works. It should work, but for all I know, it's the same type of thing that's going on here. I don't think so, though. I think I made this is the actual hyperlink that should take you out. So that's another way you can access it is through weekly units, and then that's a lot of clicking. But anyway, I'll fix that. Week 2 slides. I don't have that hyperlinked. I can do that, but they're over here under this as well. And then this week, your lab, you're not doing anything with visible body. That may be a relief to all of you, or some of you, or none of you, either way, or or neutral about it, but no visible body this week. What we're doing instead is a hyperthermia case study. Um, Case, you can read through it between now and Thursday if you want, but our Thursday night class, we're going to go through the case study a little bit together, or I'll go through it with you together. You can take notes, you can ask questions, chime in. And then we'll also go through the portfolio a little bit. We'll have some time, a little bit of time Thursday. So to do these things, we're going to get through what we need to tonight, probably by about 7:30 or so. 7:45, maybe 8. But we just need to talk a little bit about homeostasis, and then that'll relate a little bit to what you're going to do in your case study. And then that segues into talking about chemistry and some of the basics of biochemistry and the kind of chemistry we use in here. Again, nobody, don't, X out and run out of the room when you hear that word either. It's not bad. It'll go smoothly, and you guys will be just fine with the chemistry. So anyway, Thursday I'll be looking at that case study again. Between now and then, if you do get a chance, take a peek at it. And then there's a review for chapter 2, and then the Quizlets. And then finally the portfolio, which again, I want to go through that a little bit on Thursday and answer a few questions or discuss a couple of items in there. Let's see. And then the exam as well. So you probably won't be ready for that for a few more days, but I'm probably going to add maybe either a little more meat to this review, or a separate kind of almost like a review outline. So similar to this outline, but maybe a little more bulleted, condensed to this, and this, and you'll be fine. But you'll see this outline is pretty good, and the exam questions generally are going to go right off of that outline. So anyway, smooth sailing. This week is relatively straightforward. There's not a lot of craziness, but as we scroll down, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, kind of clean things up a little bit. You've got the link to the textbook chapter, which again is right up here, and then your 4 items that you need to do: the Padlet, the week 2 lab assignment, the portfolio, and then the exam. Okay, so a lot less beefy, a lot less distractions maybe for you. And again, just follow what we do tonight. Go through chapter 2. There are a few things in chapter 2 that we're not going to really get into, and that, primarily, and we'll talk about them when we get there, but acid, base, kind of pH balance, we're not going to do much with that. So when you get into chapter 2 and you see anything, a whole section about pH and acid base and that, you can read through it if you want, but I'm not going to discuss it tonight. We're going to stick with what WIDS, or the state of Wisconsin, objectives gave us to do. So without further ado, let's get going. Do you guys have any questions? Do you like the little less bulk in there? I know that as we go, we're going to see, like once we get into bones and muscles, and there'll be some more stuff. But remember, the Padlet is pretty beefy. The Padlets, as you know, you only have to do one under each, but check them all out. Each of those videos, when I put those videos in, I go off of let me pull it up because I talked about it before. The first night of class, pardon me. Okay. So the state of Wisconsin basically tells us what we need to teach you. And so the objectives for week 2, dealing with the chemical aspects, are right in here. And so when I create, and you have access to this under your syllabus. And so, and you can't see what I'm looking at. It's the the Word document. I'd have to go under syllabus. Sorry about that. I forget when I share screen, I can only really share this document right here, this course outcome summary. That gives us the objectives that we do. So I make the Padlet videos based on each. So we have like 6 or 7 objectives to do. So the Padlet videos have those objectives. In fact, um, I'll show them to you again in here. So if you're ever wondering or need more assistance or guidance with what we're doing, refer back to those Padlet videos, especially if you only watched one of them and you're kind of like, I'm not sure what he was talking about regarding the difference between an atom, a molecule, an element, an ion, a compound. What is all this stuff? There's a Padlet video that goes through it as well. So anyway, I just wanted to make note of that. Okay, good. Sweet. Okay, excellent. Less is more, especially with this stuff. So let me see, present, and we'll get a move on. Okay, so in Dropbox, again, if you guys have questions about Dropbox, looks great. Okay, cool, thanks. Good. I'll keep doing it generally that way. Again, I think it keeps it straightforward. Adding those new tabs, those kind of hyperlink tabs, so you can get out to where you need. I think generally will work out better. So, and as always, again, just email me whenever you have questions. So I think we can check off the first 3 items. And again, if you do need me to go back through how to do a Dropbox, this class, I think for the most part, just about all of you turned at least one or both items in the Dropbox. So I appreciate that. That's good work, and keep that rhythm going. I also wanted to mention too that, and I'll put it out in an announcement. I'll put a link to it, but a few of you have reached out about a tutor, a face-to-face, right? Because several of you prefer a face-to-face setting. Well, a tutor is a way to get that accomplished this semester. Unfortunately, we can't meet together, but I know Elkhorn, Racine, and Kenosha have face-to-face tutoring. They also have virtual tutoring, like we're doing, or not like we're doing. They have Zoom tutoring. So you can Zoom, or you can set up a time or an appointment. You would meet with a former A&P student, likely, that has been successful and is probably in the nursing program or one of the other allied health programs. So any of my students that have reached out for tutoring have had great success with it. So again, we're still in the early stages of the semester. So I'm not telling you it's going to get easier. I'm not telling you it's going to get harder. I am telling you that it will continue to be a lot of work. So if time management, or some students, being able to go onto campus was kind of their outlet or their getaway uh, from family, or from whatever, right? Just being at home. Sometimes home's distracting, right? Even when nobody's home except you, there's distractions. So please go to whatever campus you're used to going to. If you need to make an appointment, the library's open. You can go in there, the computer, the labs, and so anyway. So whatever. Reach out, send me an email. You guys know what you're doing, and if you don't know what you're doing, send me an email. And if you really know that you need something more than what I can provide you with, then by all means, let me know that too, because I can get you linked up with some amazing folks that will get you the help that you need to succeed in here, and not just in here, but in general. So homeostasis, your textbook talks a little bit about homeostasis. Homeostasis is a kind of a theme throughout both general and advanced. It's definitely the overriding theme in advanced A&P. So I do want to mention it. I want to talk about it just briefly, show you a few slides, and give you a few examples of what I mean when I mention homeostasis. we do spend a little more time on it at the beginning of advanced, only because that's really the bread and butter and the foundation of everything we do in advanced. So but it would be a disservice to you in general to not at least mention it and to discuss it and give you a couple of examples, because we do some physiology and some chemistry this semester. Not a lot, but some. All right. So anyway, again, the outline is in there. So if you found that, um, you could certainly kind of link it with this PowerPoint and with everything that you're studying. And Padlet case study portfolio exam, again, due by the end of the day next Monday night. And again, guys, the stuff doesn't close on you. So if you're past midnight, if you're a couple days, I mean, don't sweat it. Everything's open. It'll stay open. You're not going to get penalized, but again, the deadlines are there really to kind of keep you going week to week to week. And just because, as you know, man, the days fly by, and you younger folks, you hear it from us old farts, and I was a young fart one time too, and I believed the old guys, and the old folks, and they talk about time when you get older, but whew, they're right. I'm 45, and time flies when time moves faster than ever. So anyhow, we'll keep her moving. Um, So yeah, stay on top of things is my point. All right, so homeostasis. Let's talk a little bit about homeostasis for a few minutes. We're going to define it, give you a couple of examples of it. We're going to talk about feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback, and talk about the kind of the main mechanisms of homeostatic control. When we look at homeostasis, we're basically thinking about something as simple as what we consider to be balance. The body is trying to maintain balance at all times with several of its different physiological processes. So we think about internal body temperature being 98.6. We think about blood pressure being 120/80. We're thinking about heart rate in that 60 to 100 range, and so on and so on. There are so many ranges, and most, if not all of you, heading into the nursing field are going to be checking a lot of these different values. You're going to be taking vital signs, and the reason you do these vital signs is really to try and determine whether or not, or maybe not whether or not, it's not quite that cut and dry, but maybe to what degree the individual patient is out of homeostasis. Okay, are they borderline diabetic or borderline whatever? That just means they're on the edge of being outside of homeostasis, and maybe into a disease state or a pathology state. So really the opposite of homeostasis then is going to be disease, right? So the name of the game and everything you guys do in the clinic is really kind of addressing homeostasis and to what degree your patients are in or out of these ranges. So temperature regulation, of course, can be indicative of, a fever can be indicative of a variety of things. We look at carbon dioxide levels, oxygen levels. So whenever we talk about CO2 or carbon dioxide, we always talk about oxygen. So, we look at pulse oximeters nowadays, and that can tell us, so respiration rate, we can determine whether or not we've got CO2 levels that are too high, and CO2 buildup can make a system somewhat acidic. So CO2 brings pH into the acidic range, and acidity in the body over a long period of time can lead to all kinds of chronic pathologies, including cancer. Blood glucose levels. So certainly, right, we're constantly monitoring blood sugar levels, not necessarily with a blood sugar monitor. We don't all have one, but our brains tell us, right? When we're hungry, our blood sugar's low, we get a little groggy, we may get a little bit edgy, whatever, right? The Snickers commercials. And so, yeah, they're just saying that the blood glucose levels are a little bit off. So your body is constantly regulating all of these mechanisms, and these mechanisms, for the most part, are involuntary. Your brain is not necessarily consciously thinking about, am I at 98.6? Am I at 120/80? Am I at 65 beats a minute? Et cetera, and so forth. So you're not really thinking, is my pancreas releasing enough insulin, and are my kidneys filtering properly? We don't think about these things. Nearly everything that's going on in the body, day in, day out, from moment to moment, is automatic. So, and homeostasis is the name of that game. And these systems work together, right? We looked a little bit last week at the different body systems. We're going to spend this entire semester going system by system, and what we can maybe, I won't say lose sight of, but maybe lose sight of as we go through the semester, just kind of compartmentalizing these systems, losing sight of the fact that they are all intrinsically linked. The digestive, the respiratory, the cardiovascular, the nervous system, urinary, these are all connected. So, and they're all connected to communicate and to basically maintain that homeostatic balance. So we see, we bring groceries in through the mouth, and those nutrients are going to get broken down and picked up by the bloodstream. The blood is going to carry those nutrients out to the cells, and then the cells are going to deliver waste or eliminate any of the waste products or toxins that get left behind. They'll get picked up by the bloodstream and delivered to the urinary system or to the digestive tract to, again, eliminate the waste. So groceries in, garbage out. We see the respiratory system, again, bringing in oxygen, eliminating carbon dioxide. It's the bloodstream that's going to pick up that oxygen, deliver it to the cells to enable the cells to convert that oxygen and the sugar that we got from the digestive system into ATP, or energy. So anyway, basically, we're trying to feed cells a bunch of chemicals, and in turn, those cells use chemicals to produce structures. So we give cells micro particles, basically, from the nutrients we consume, and from those particles we call chemicals, cells are able to function. Some of those functions involve energy. Some of those functions involve making things, right? Repairing tissues. Some of those functions involve producing hormones, producing enzymes, producing other chemicals. So anyway, a lot of action going on, and that's really what this is what we focus on. It's kind of a teaser trailer to what we do in advanced, all of this stuff that you're seeing here. We have different feedback loops that I'll mention and get into in just a second. And actually, I'll come back around from there. We're going to look at these components of homeostasis. What keeps homeostasis going? Well, communication is important. Just in any walk of life, we need to be able to communicate. Well, the body has its own communication system set up, and that communication system is going to involve nerves primarily. So the nervous system is the primary system that's responsible for all of this communication and all of this maintenance of homeostasis. So we're going to have what we call a sensory aspect, and this would also be known as like the stimulus portion. So if you touch something hot, if you see something bright, if you hear something loud, these are all different types of stimuli. These stimuli are going to get picked up by sensory nerves. Okay, so we have a sensory mechanism, and that sensory mechanism or that sensory nerve has a pathway that's going to send that information to the control center. We call this the brain or the central nervous system. Okay, so the control center, the central nervous system. From there, the central nervous system or the control center is going to send out some sort of a response. So we get a stimulus coming in and a response going out. Okay, so the sensory is the stimulus, the effector is the response mechanism. And typically, the effector mechanism is going to be some sort of a muscle or a gland, and the muscle is going to be skeletal, cardiac, or smooth. So, any of the muscle types that we're going to look at here in a couple of weeks when we analyze tissue, or glands. And we're going to see glands as well in a couple of weeks when we look at tissue as well. So the effector mechanism is typically some sort of a muscle or a gland. Okay, stimulus and response. If you took psychology, well, you don't have to take psychology to know psychology in some ways, right? A stimulus is going to elicit or lead to a response, right? I ding the bell, I get the dog to drool, that classical conditioning. And so our bodies also kind of go through this classical conditioning and establish what we call set points. Now, set points in a homeostatically balanced system are going to be those normal ranges I just mentioned, 98.6, 120 over 80, all of that good stuff, right? These normal vital ranges that are looked at in the clinic are ideal set points. Okay, now when someone has a chronic condition, whether it's chronic pain, chronic, related to arthritis, related, whatever it might be, that can stress, certainly, depending on the type of job and the type of coping mechanisms the patient has, they could be under a lot of stress. And one of the things, so stress is the sensor. So we perceive the stress, or there's actual physical stress, whatever it might be. And the response oftentimes is to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure. It's like you see the bear and, you're going to, I don't know what you do when you see a bear. I don't know, probably run, although maybe, I don't know, play dead, climb a tree. Either way, you poop your pants, maybe, or pee. I don't know. That's a rough one. I don't avoid the wood. I don't avoid the woods, just because I might see a bear. But yeah, it's exactly. We call it fight or flight. Good, Stephanie. Yeah, it's that and freeze. Another F word, right? Fight or flight or freeze. And some people lock up, or animals even. So these are animal instincts: fight, flight, freeze. That sympathetic pathway. What that does is it triggers the blood pressure to skyrocket, heart rate to skyrocket. Well, okay, if you perceive stress all the time, you perceive the bears chasing you all of the time, that can put your body into a new normal, a new set point. So if Mr. Jones goes to the clinic, he gets his blood pressure taken, it's 140 over 100. That's a problem potentially. So we need to find out, is this his new normal? Is he just stressed out about today's visit? Why is his blood pressure so high? So we may have him do a log. We may monitor him and see if he goes home, he does his blood pressure. We are able to monitor his blood pressure, and we see, oh, it's 120 over 125 over 85 pretty much all the time when he's at home. So maybe he was just stressed out that day or at that moment. I don't know. Maybe he was sick, maybe he had an infection. I don't know. But if he goes home and he's doing his blood pressure readings over and over, and we're seeing that it's always around that 140 over 95 or 100 range, and that's his new normal. He has a new set point. So that makes our jobs as clinicians maybe a little bit trickier because we're dealing with a chronic condition that has put his integration or control center into a higher or a different level of set point. It's almost like a tolerance. You start to like all of us have the same pain threshold. Okay, when if I were to hook a couple of electrodes up to you and turn it up to a certain voltage, no matter who it is gonna respond at about the same voltage to pain. That's called a threshold. But tolerance is different, right? So all of us have a different pain tolerance. So, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. If you can tolerate a lot of pain, that can lead to new set points and stressors. And this is tricky, especially when you guys are working in the clinic. You're going to see a lot of, especially men, older men who are more stubborn about going to the doctor. They may come in and they haven't been to a doctor in 30 years. There's a lot of farmers around, and can't get them into the doctor. So, you know, uh, they develop new set points, and so it makes our job sometimes kind of tricky and trying to establish, because a higher blood pressure, that's the new normal for Mr. Jones, is believe it or not, it's putting a lot of strain on his blood vessels, especially his arteries. He's setting himself up for aneurysms, or aneurysms rupturing, and other factors. So we're trying to nip things in the bud before they get out of hand, because these new set points just lead to metabolic issues that end up costing a lot of issues. Oh man. I mean, that's Lori says patients with a regular blood BAC of 0.455, you know, that, and that, that's probably, I don't know where you work or what you do, but it could be if it's an alcoholism situation, we can't cut them off, right? They have what's called a physiological dependency, and so there's a long process to weaning them off of that. Um so yeah. So yeah, that will. So anyhow, we new. So now, someone that's a functional alcoholic, they have totally different set points regarding obvi- obviously blood alcohol content, but we're going to see liver enzymes are going to be way off. We're going to see uh, uh, probably some sort of type 2 diabetes issue oftentimes. Um, Severe pH imbalances, systemic dehydration, kidney failure, respiratory issues. The list goes on. So again, all these body systems working in tandem with one another. So this effector stuff is called feedback, right? You guys do something you guys all turn in your stuff, your portfolios. I provide you feedback. So that's basically what the brain is doing for your body. It's providing feedback to the muscles and to the glands, basically saying, this is the feedback, this is what I need you to do. Typically the feedback is a lot like another way of saying the response. So effector, the effect, the response, the feedback, those could all be kind of lumped into the same thing. Either way, it's the signals going away from the brain. It's the directives going away from the brain. This feedback is typically what we call negative feedback. And negative simply means that we are opposing the stimulus. So if the stimulus is, this is a really hot surface, the response that your brain is going to send out, the feedback that gets sent out is to oppose that heat. So lift your hand away from it, put it in ice on it. So oppose the stimuli. This is going on constantly. I walk into a room that's dark, and I was just in a really bright room, or vice versa, or I'm going to get pupils dilating or constricting depending on the amount of light. If it's a really dim room, the stimulus is I don't have a lot of light. The response is I need to dilate the pupils to get more light. So again, the negative feedback. Blood glucose levels. Blood glucose levels are low. So the response is we need to increase stored glucose to be released. Glyconeogenesis. We need to get glucagon and insulin balanced back out. Calcium levels we're constantly regulating too with the thyroid and parathyroid glands. So there's just this constant teeter-totter effect going on in the body we don't even pay attention to, and nor should we. We have a lot of stuff to do. But you guys are going to have to pay attention to it, though, over the next couple of semesters, and then your clinical lives, if you're not there already, are really based on looking at homeostasis, aren't they? Yeah. And feedback, negative feedback mechanisms. So anyhow, I don't want to belabor too much of this. Negative, again, opposing the stimulus. It's a stabilizing mechanism. Okay, so just because it has the word negative doesn't mean it's bad. Negative in this situation means opposing something. So we could just call it oppositional feedback. Okay. It's probably a better connotation, but yeah, negative feedback we need that to be occurring. Positive feedback is enhancing the response, is enhancing whatever the stimulus was. So we see this around childbirth at 40, around 35 to 40 weeks. Baby's getting bigger, signals are getting sent to the mom. So the stimulus is we've got a large baby in here. The response is, and the baby wants out, right? Hopefully that's the idea. And so the mom response is involuntarily is that uterine contraction starts happening. The oxytocin levels start to go up, and we're enhancing the stimulus. The original stimulus is let me out of here. Gets the uterine contracting. So we want to enhance that and release more oxytocin. Don't go to the emergency room and get a bunch of Pitocin put in your veins, though. Hey, speaking of there's a little bugger. Hey, yeah, awesome. What a cutie pie. All right, so and no, I'm not talking about me. Um, there was a baby on board for just a few seconds there. Okay, specific body function. Okay, so anyway, positive feedback, baby. So thanks, Stephanie. That was perfect timing. We didn't really have that planned out. Just happened to work out that way. So let's see, levels of homeostatic control. Again, this is going on everywhere. It's going on inside of the cells. It's going on at the tissue organ level. It's going on between organs. So we already know this, that the body, from the smallest levels at the chemical level all the way up to the organism level and everywhere in between, are all working together to regulate the body systems. So let's move into chemistry, talk a little bit about chemistry, and then you guys can get a move on and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Let's see. Chapter 2. So the first 2 slides, these are the 9 objectives or so that again come from the state of Wisconsin. They want us to look at what an atom is, and again, several of you have probably seen this before at some point in your lives, I would imagine. But some of the verbiage maybe gets a little bit muddled after a while. So again, I urge you to go into the Padlet. One of the videos in there does break down some of this as well. Let's see. We're going to just look at a couple types of bonding. We're going to analyze inorganic versus organic compounds. We'll talk about the importance of water. That's going to be part of the case study. So the case study you're going to do on Thursday, or for week 2, we're going to look at it on Thursday, is going to involve some homeostasis stuff. So it's going to have some negative feedback. It's going to have some set points, effector stimulus. It's going to have some of that going for it. It's also going to have some discussions on water and why water and hydration is so important to, well, we'll see. There's several reasons, laundry list of reasons why water is so vital. It could never be overstated. It really can't. We really need to be drinking a lot of water. Oxygen. In fact, a physician several years ago wrote a book called "You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty." And that was like the subtitle. I can't remember the exact the main title. I think it's called "Your Body's Many Cries for Water." That's the title. The subtitle is "You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty." And it it's a short. It's like 100 pages long, but it's really, really tremendous. It's written by a medical doctor who had worked as a cardiac physician for like 35 years. And one of the consistent themes he was seeing with his patients is every single one of them was dehydrated, systemically dehydrated. And so whether they're arthritic, whether they're, whatever it might be, pH imbalances, you need to drink more water. So anyway, seems like a simple fix, right? Then we wouldn't have anything to do in the clinic if water was the only answer. So there's more to it than that, of course, right? So anyway, and we'll look at enzymes as well briefly. We'll talk as well a little briefly about oxygen and carbon dioxide. Right, that's what they tell you. They also drink a ton. They're up, right? And a lot of that is medication based. A lot of their medications are diuretic. They're high in sodium levels. A lot of older people are caffeine addicts. They won't admit it, but they are. So much of it is dietary based, as well as just getting old, right? As we get old, things don't work as well, and certainly the kidneys are one of those items. But yeah, they really have to pay attention to stress levels. They have to pay attention to glucose and sugar levels. They have to pay attention to breathing. Older people have respiratory issues that triggers urination to increase because of pH regulations. See, your respiratory system regulates your pH, and your urinary system is a helper for that. But respiratory is number one. Well, if respiratory isn't working right, again, a lot of people suffer from COPDs, or maybe they don't suffer from COPDs or asthmas, but they do suffer from just lack of activity, sedentary lifestyles, and again, they're old, and so they're more dehydrated anyway, right? I think elderly people tend to be more dehydrated just by nature. And so a lot more reason why they do need to drink more water. But it becomes, that cat or dog chasing the tail, or the cat chases the red dot all over the place. But the dog chasing its tail, right? You're spinning in circles. You're not getting anywhere. But what they don't tell you, again, is if you're keeping an eye on the medications, all these farms that they're dumping that down a lot of elderly people's throats, a lot of again, the beverages that they consume, the stress levels, their sleep habits, there's so many things, and so having to get up at night to pee constantly is not fun. They may be type 2 diabetes. There's so many, a lot of elder. I mean, if you're over the age of 65, it's like a 1 in 2 chance that you're diabetic, That sounds like fun. Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I look forward to getting old. Yeah, well, yeah, but yeah, they do pee a lot. They don't and that's what they'll tell you. My mom and dad, they're 74 and 70. My dad's 74, my mom's 70. They have I have aunts and uncles, they have siblings, they live in Tennessee, they live in New Hampshire, and they don't really like to fly, so they like to drive, but they won't even drive anymore because every hour they're having to make pit stops. And with the COVID and all that, they're noited out about pits, I don't know, peeing in public restrooms, which I was noited out about before COVID. So either way, if you wash your hands and you don't touch anything, you don't have to, and you'll be fine. But yeah, they pee up, but they're also on a battery of medications. And my dad's type 2 diabetic. Everything I just got done saying, they just fall into the normal group, right? And it's that baby boomer group, and they're going to keep all of us busy. Yep. Job security for life for all of us and for our kids and our grandkids. That's why we can't make the same mistakes they do or that they did. We don't want to be living that lifestyle that they did. Workaholics, caffeineaholics, just money, stress. Sleep, go, right? Busy, 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 busy. And then they hit that wall at 70, they're ready to retire, and they can't enjoy it because they're so gunked up from all the other stuff they were doing. Oh yeah. And that now more meds, right? Now, yep, UTIs kick in, yeah, kidney stones, dialysis, constipation issues. Man, yeah, I'm gonna go live under a rock, and just leave me alone and stay away. Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I can't do that. I've got to get you guys educated so you guys can go educate your patients and family members and tell them what the good life is like, or show them. Don't tell them. Nobody listens to what you say, but they listen to what you how you how you how you are, right? All right. So anyway, let's get into a little bit of chemistry so you guys can go to bed and sleep soundly with all this wonderful info in your brains. All right, elements and compounds. So we're going to look at matter. And that's generally we think of matter as solids, liquids, and gases. Now there are other forms of matter that they've discussed, and it's like plasma is a form of matter now. But we're going to stick with solids, liquids, and gases for the most part. The elements, we see those on the periodic table. And again, the arrangement of these elements is going to be similar to, or going to relate to, not be similar to, the arrangement of these elements on the periodic table has to do with how many atoms and the amount of protons in the nucleus of these atoms. So when we look at a periodic table, we see a lot of numbers and letters. And again, this is potentially a trigger. I don't want any anger, outbursts, sad, no crying, no running. So you have to stay right here, and you can look away, I suppose, but it's not bad. I prettied it up. It's got pinks and blues and other colors, so it's not too shabby. But you've got the major elements of the body. I promise we're only going to focus on a couple of these, and one is hydrogen. Everybody's heard of that. And then these other three here, CNO, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. So those are the four main elements. Those four make up probably 95, 96% of the entire body. Remember, water is like 2/3 of the body, and water is two hydrogens and an oxygen, right? H2O. So there's 65% of your body is just those two. And then carbohydrates and proteins and fats, that's the other, that's pretty much it. So when we fill in the other couple percent of everything that you are, that's where we're going to find some sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium, chlorine, phosphorus, sulfur. And then we find these little bits of trace elements. These are these kind of peach colored ones here. Okay. Zinc, right? You need a little bit of zinc. Iron, right? Iron's a big deal for preventing anemia. Oxygen is carried by hemoglobin, which is iron is one of the main components. of hemoglobin in your red blood cells. So most of this stuff you've already heard at some point. Now we can break it down even better for you, to being just really hydrogen, carbon, HC, N, and O. That's it. 4 items. I could put everything, almost everything under those 4. All right, let's look at these numbers just real quick. Again, it's late, so math and numbers get weird, but it's just addition, so we can handle addition. This chemical symbol is the letter we use. So C is the carbon chemical symbol. The number on top is what we call the atomic number. That has to do with protons in the nucleus. Now, the protons make up the weight along with what we call neutrons. So the P's and the N's, the protons and neutrons, are in the middle. They make up the nucleus and the weight, the atomic mass, which is on the bottom. That's what the protons and the neutrons combined. So the number of protons is the top number. That's how we number the periodic table. So that's how when they discovered these elements, they were able to, with their super duper microscopes, figure out how many protons were in the nucleus of these forms of matter, whether it's a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Okay, so anyway, this is the third item, right? The third subatomic particle is electrons, right? Protons, neutrons, and electrons. The electrons are the real lightweight little buggers that are kind of floating and orbiting around the solid, more bulky nucleus, which is, again, the protons and neutrons. So protons, neutrons, and electrons out here. The number of protons happens to be the same as the number of electrons. So that atomic number tells us a lot. It really does. It tells us not only the number of protons, but it also tells us the number of electrons. So if I were to ask you, how many electrons does iodine have? Iodine's chemical symbol is I. So we come down and there it is right here, I. How many electrons does iodine have? Well, it has 53 as an atomic number, which means it has 53 protons, but that also means it has 53 electrons. Okay. So protons and electrons are always equal and they're unchangeable. If we change the number, then the element changes, right? If I change the number of protons from 6 to 8, it's no longer carbon, it's now oxygen. So that number doesn't change. It's strict to the element that it is. Now the neutrons and therefore the atomic mass, that number can change. So that's why you see a couple numbers represented here for some of these. Those are what they call isotopes. Iso means same. So an isotope of carbon simply means that we have a couple different forms of carbon that are going to have the same number of protons, same number of electrons, but a different number of neutrons. Typically protons and neutrons are going to be around the same. So 6 for carbon for protons, 6 for neutrons, sometimes more. So we could have 7. So then we would have an isotope of carbon, carbon 16, carbon 12, carbon 14. So that just means we've added more neutrons. Okay, so if you're asked about an isotope, simply think and recall that the neutrons are what can change. Okay, it's still the same element because we haven't changed the protons, but we've maybe created an isotope, something similar to that, to the original element, just with a slightly different weight to it because of that extra neutron. So anyway, where am I going to get too much deeper into that? So this is just the black and white of what we just got done talking about. P's, N's, and E's. Again, the protons and the neutrons are going to be in the nucleus. They're what provide the mass or the bulk of the structure of the element. And then the electrons are what float around in orbit in their little shell. Okay, so we see one example here. And by the way, again, electrons have a negative charge. So we see those represented with a negative. Protons are going to be represented with a positive charge. And again, we would have the same number. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 electrons. We have 6 protons. You can only see 5 though, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one right here is actually coming out at you. And the sixth one is going away from you. This is a three-dimensional model in two-dimensional flat screen. So you guys, can you see that, how this would actually be kind of coming out at you, and the sixth one is hidden behind this bulk. Okay. So this would be carbon. Then it's got 6 protons and 6 electrons. So we just looked at this again, the black and white of what we just got done discussing. Now, what's a molecule of something? Typically, a molecule is when we bond 2 or more atoms of the same. It doesn't have to be the same element, but it oftentimes is. So for instance, if we bond 2 oxygens together, we have the gas that we breathe, and that's oxygen gas. Okay, so that's an oxygen molecule. And then a compound is when we bond 2 or more elements, and typically different elements. So here we'd see sodium and chlorine bonding together with one another. Now, this is what we're going to see in a few minutes, is what we call an ionic bond. And that's kind of that last one. An ion is an electrically charged molecule, so atom or molecule. So we would see a plus or a minus. So the element stays the same, but if it's positive, that means it donated one of its extra electrons. So it's less negative, right? It gave away some of its negativity. It's an electron donor, so it's a little more positive than it was. Okay. So then whoever received that electron, the electron recipient is going to have a little bit more negativity. So it's going to have a negative charge. Okay, that's what an ion is, when we start shuffling electrons around. And typically, let me go back to the periodic table for a second. Typically, we see these guys over here, sodium and potassium, are going to be able to donate 1 electron. So we'll oftentimes see sodium ion. Sodium atom, which is what you see here, can become a sodium ion by donating 1 of its extra electrons. Potassium atom can become a potassium ion by donating 1 of its positive electrons. And how that works has to do with what we call these outer shells are trying to attain a full outer shell of 8. We call it the octet rule. So I don't want to get too far down the chemistry rabbit hole. Some of you probably have already checked. Hell, you may have checked out at 6:05. I don't know. You checked in, but you really checked out, right? I hope that's not the case, but I'm not here to micromanage anybody. But I will tell you that these guys can donate 1. So they're usually going to be a positive charge ion. Magnesium and calcium can donate 2. They have 2 in their outer shell, so they can give those 2 up. And then their second shell now becomes their outer shell, which will have 8 in it. So anyway, chlorine is typically going to be an electron receiver. All right, somebody. I would not necessarily. Oops. Let me go back to that. It has more to do with. My thing locked up on me. Sorry about that. There we go. The donating, the ability to donate has more to do with what column they're in, or the ability to receive. So this first row, or I mean, this first column here, um, all of these are going to have one electron in their valence, or outermost shell. So these are all going to be able to donate one. And then the second uh, period, or second column, these guys are going to have two in their outer shell to be able to donate. And then this doesn't have the Roman numerals, but a lot of periodic tables have Roman numerals at the top that tells you what period that they're in. It's why it's a periodic table. And so this is the seventh period over here. So these are going to have 7 electrons in their outer shell. So they're going to be needing one more. So they're electron receivers. They're ready to grab one. These so anyway, that's kind of how that breaks down regarding who gets what. A lot of it has to do with what column they're in. Oh, bless her heart, Lori. Yeah, chemistry majors. Whew. Yeah, so she could help you with some of the cool stuff. All right, so yeah, she can help you with some of this for sure. Chemistry is somewhat confusing. Um, what I just got done kind of going through is what we call inorganic chemistry. It's just looking at the periodic table. We talk a little bit about some of the basics, and then we start getting into kind of what I was just getting ready to kind of go through, is a little bit with these not energy levels, but kind of these different I guess energy levels, or electron levels, electron shells, electron clouds. They've got all kinds of names, but that the first electron level, or electron shell, it maxes out at 2 electrons. So and remember, electron number will tell you the proton number, which tells you the atomic number, which tells you the element at that point. So darn it. So the second, any subsequent shells as we go out, max out at 8 electrons till they're complete. So we see hydrogen and helium, number 1 on the periodic table, it just has 1 proton, therefore it has 1 electron. And again, it just has that one inner shell. Helium has 2 protons, 2 electrons. So now that shell is complete. After that, the next circle, or the next shell, we can max out at 8. So anyhow, they give us carbon, oxygen, and neon, for instance. So it's showing like carbon has 6 protons, so it's going to have 6 electrons. So we put the first 2 in the inner shell, and then the next 4 can go in this outer shell. Okay, oxygen, same way. We've got 2. Now we have 6 left over, so we can put the remaining 6 in that outer shell. So these are all going to be on the right side of the periodic table, except hydrogen, but these are on the right side of the table. So notice these are close to carbon's a little different, because carbon's right in the middle, right? It's that octet rule of 8. So carbon can either get 4 more to have 8, or it could give 4 more, but it typically is going to receive or combine and form a lot of different, what we call covalent bonds. So we're going to see a lot of sharing of electrons usually with carbon. So anyway, oxygen is going to be a receiver, right? Because it has 6 in its outer shell, so it's close to 8. It only needs 2 more. Where's it going to get those 2? Well, it could get them from right here, right? We could add a hydrogen here. I could get another hydrogen and add it over here. And now I've got 8 in that outer shell. Hydrogen's happy because it has 2, right? It shared this one and has this one. So it's complete. It has 2. Now we have water, right? H2O. So that's why water is so easy to form. is because oxygen has 2 extra slots available. Hydrogen happens to have 1 slot, so it can fit in one, and then another hydrogen can come in and fit in the other slot, and that'll give us 2 hydrogens with water. And now we have a polar, now we're polarized. We've got the positives and negatives and the electron shells, everything's balanced. Okay. Um, Isotopes I mentioned earlier. Again, it's going to be the um, same element, just a different number of neutrons. So again, with isotopes, it's the neutron number that changes. Protons and electrons will stay the same. Okay. I'm not going to harp too much on that. We're going to keep the ball rolling here. Chemical bonds, so we can join we can unite or join 2 different atoms into groupings, forming molecules. The 2 main types of bonding we see are called ionic and covalent. Ionic bonding is what we've kind of been talking about up to this point, is donating and receiving electrons. So again, usually we would see then that outer shell is close to 8 for one element and is nowhere near 8 for the other element. So one that's nowhere near 8, it can just donate off 1 or 2 of its electrons, and the other one who's almost at an 8, it can have room to receive those. So that's what we see with ionic bonding. So they become ions. So the sodium ion and the chloride ion can join forces, because sodium has 1 to give and chloride has 1 to receive. Covalent bonds involve sharing of electrons. So oftentimes we see these happening with like carbon and oxygen. Carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, they do a lot of covalent bonding. Because they're not, they're close. They're at 4, carbon's at 4 electrons in its outer shell. All right, so anyway, again, not to belabor this too terribly much, but we do see this sodium atom. So this is the sodium, it has no charge. This is what's on the periodic table. It has its atomic number is 11, so it has 11 protons and 11 electrons in its outer shell, or in all of its electron shells. So the first 2 are going to be in the inner shell, and then the next 8 in the second shell. So once we filled up that second shell with 8, that puts us at 10 total. So we still have 1 more. So that's why we need that extra shell for that 1 extra electron. This outer shell is called a valence shell. So they oftentimes will call us electrovalent bonding, as well as ionic bonding. So this sodium atom has 1 kind of lone electron. When we look at chlorine atoms, or a chlorine atom, again, we see 17 protons in the middle. Again, those first 2 electrons get taken in that first shell, and then we get the next 8 here in the second shell, so that puts us at 10. We still have 7 to go, so those 7 are going to come out here in this outer shell. So it's got 7 in its outer shell, chlorine atom. Sodium atom only has 1, so sodium is going to donate that over. Because once it donates that over, now its outer shell, notice, is complete. It has 8 electrons in its outer shell. It hasn't changed its element. It still it hasn't lost any of its protons, so it's still sodium, but it now becomes an ion. We put a positive there because it became more positive, right? It lost a negative, so therefore it became a little bit more positive. You guys see that? It lost some negativity. That's why we give it that little plus. That just means that when I see Na plus, it simply means I have a sodium ion, and that means that it donated its electron from its outer shell. Chloride ion it becomes an ion when it becomes more negative. So again, it had 7 electrons in its outer shell. It gained that 8th electron, and that made it a little bit more negative than it was. So it gets the that negative superscript there. Okay. And so what that means, we've got 8 in the outer shell of the sodium ion. We've got 8 electrons now in the outer shell of the chloride ion. And what that's going to do is cause an attraction to occur. And we call this an ionic bond, positives and negatives coming together. Okay, so ionic or electrovalent bonding. Okay, and then a covalent bond we can see happening. We can get a hydrogen molecule with a covalent bond. We can simply take the one negative and the other negative, take 2 hydrogen atoms, bind them together, and now covalent means sharing. So co means together. Valent has to do with, again, that valence shell or that outer shell. So covalent just means the outer shells came together. Okay, so the covalent bond there. Okay, you see the same thing with carbon. Remember, carbon has 6 total electrons. The first 2 on that inner shell, and then the other 4, remaining 4, are going to be in the outer shell. Okay. Oxygen, remember, is an 8, so it's going to have 2 in the inner and 6 in the outer. So it's 2 away from being happy. So if we take 2 oxygens, which are both 2 away from being satisfied with that octet rule, well, carbon can combine 2 of its 4 to this guy, 2 of its other 4 to this guy, and now we have a covalent double bond here where I can see the sharing going on of electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So oxygen has 8 now in its outer shell. Carbon went from 4 to now 8 in its outer shell. 1, 2, its original 2, and then it got 2 from this oxygen. 1, 2, its original 2, and then 2 from this oxygen. So now we've got 4 here and 4 here. So its outer shell is satisfied too with 8. Okay. So we see the same thing with this oxygen. It had 6 in its outer shell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it's going to share these 2 with this carbon and satisfy the octet rule over here. Whew. So anyway, that's That's a little bit of bonding. Ionics tend to be strong. Covalents are also strong, maybe not quite as strong. These are a little stronger than these. Ionics are a little stronger than covalent. Hydrogen bonds are extremely weak. They're easily broken. We see this with polar molecules. Again, primarily we would think of these as hydrogen bonds being with water, right? Like H2O. So hydrogen bonded to an O, and another hydrogen bonded to another O or an N or an F. So typically we would see H2O or HNO2. Okay. Generally, though, we would see hydrogen bonding with oxygen, forming hydrogen bonds. We do see hydrogen filling some of the space with some of our carbon bonds, which we're going to see later. We're called carbon-hydrogen bonds that have to do with organic molecules. But those are stronger bonds, not considered hydrogen bonds, because hydrogen bonds are only generally considered hydrogen bonds when they bond with O, N, or F. So, and these are very weak. They can be broken quite easily. And again, we have 6 electrons for the oxygen, 1 for the hydrogen. So we add 2 hydrogens in. That gives us 8. And again, it looks a lot like what we'd see with like a covalent bond. Okay. And again, they're easily broken. We can add a bunch of heat to break these bonds, or we can freeze them to break those bonds. Chemical reactions, I'm not going to get too much into. We spend quite a bit of time on this next semester, but I do want to mention two of the main four. There are four basic chemical reactions. The two biggies that we're going to talk about are simply building something or breaking something down. A synthesis reaction is also called an anabolic reaction. A decomposition reaction we call a catabolic reaction. So when we look at catabolism, that simply means, first of all, we see this word metabolism. Every one of you have heard that word before. It simply means chemical reaction. That's it. It has nothing to do with anything else than simply any chemical reaction. And chemical reactions typically are going to be either breaking things apart or building things up, putting things together. The catabolic reaction involves adding water and probably some sort of an enzyme. So we're going to see the word enzyme here shortly, but we're going to basically take like a large chunk of protein, for instance, like a piece of steak, and the digestive tract, we're going to add water and some protein enzymes, and that's going to speed up the catabolizing or breaking down of that chunk of steak. We call part of that process hydrolysis. So hydro means water, lysis means to break apart. So just hydrolysis means add water, it breaks apart. So an enzyme plus water speeds the reaction up really fast. So we say an enzyme catalyzes metabolic reactions. I know a lot of this terminology, a lot of this babbling is maybe a little bit much, but too bad. I guess you signed up for it, but just regardless, just know we take big things, we eat them, and they become little things, and that's called catabolism, not cannibalism. Cat with a T-balism. Okay. Again, add water, add an enzyme. You're gonna break down carbs, proteins, and fats quickly. What happens once all the cells eat that stuff? Because right, you eat it, but really your cells are what are truly digesting and consuming everything. So they're going to go through anabolic processes, which means all of that big protein steak you ate gets broken into little amino acids, and then the cells of the body take the little amino acids and they string them together like a beaded necklace, and they form protein structures like keratin or collagen or some sort of, for instance, some sort of protein structure or fiber. That's called anabolism, building something up. This is the you are what you eat thing, right? You consume the protein, your body's water and enzymes break the protein into amino acids. The blood delivers the amino acids to your body's cells. The cells, and specifically next week, we're going to look at cells. We're going to see ribosomes and rough endoplasmic reticulum, but these guys are inside the cell. They're going to help with protein synthesis or a dehydration synthesis. So they're going to remove water, and we're going to get that as a react or as a product from anabolic reactions. Okay, we call it condensation. You've maybe heard of anabolic steroids, right? Those are the PEDs that the athletes were using to build up muscle. Anabolic, building up structure, building up muscle. Okay, so catabolism and anabolism. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, protein. Good. Yes, definitely. Protein enzymes. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that enzymes are actually made of proteins, oddly enough. But yeah, protein enzymes or proteases in water that are gonna. And yeah, without the enzymes, if I take that piece of steak and I put it in water, it'll break down, right? But it's gonna take. It could take weeks for a chunk of steak to break down in water. But if I put an enzyme in there, it'll break down in hours, right? Usually 4 to 6 hours in the stomach is how long it takes for protein to get broken down because of the proteases or protein enzymes in the stomach. So those organic and inorganic compounds that we talk about are, this is what kind of what we're consuming. If it's organic, it's going to have what we call carbon. Let's do organic first. Carbon bonded together, or carbon and hydrogen bonded together. Okay, carbon or carbon hydrogen. Carbon. We could have carbon and oxygen bound together. Does it make it an organic molecule? No, because it has to be carbon and carbon, or carbon and hydrogen. So like CO2 is carbon dioxide, it's carbon and a couple of oxygens. On the surface, it may say, oh, if carbon's there, it's got to be organic. But again, if there's not there has to be more than one carbon, or a carbon and a hydrogen. With CO2, we don't have two carbons, and we don't have any hydrogen. So that's not, so just looking for carbon isn't going to always be your telltale sign that you're dealing with organic molecules. What do I mean when I say organic molecules? Well, primarily we're talking about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. You also see them as lipids, right? Carbs, lipids, and fats. These are your three main bio molecules. We call them macromolecules, or organic molecules. So carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are going to be involved. Okay. Carbohydrate, right? Just the name, carbon and carbo. Hydrate means water, right? H2O. So a carbohydrate is CH2O. One carbon, two hydrogens, one oxygen. That's the ratio of a carbohydrate. So if I showed you a compound that had the formula C6H12O6, so it's got a 1:2:1 ratio of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens, right? C6H12O6. So 1:2:1 ratio of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. That's 9 times out of 10, that's going to be a carbohydrate. Okay. Lipids also have those same three elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, just in different. There's not a ratio. It's a random ratio. Okay, and then proteins also have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, as well as nitrogen. So think of proteins as having, protein has an N at the end of it. Proteins have nitrogen, and that means amino acids are going to be involved. Okay, amino acids. With lipids, we're going to have what are called fatty acids. So the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. Building blocks of lipids are fatty acids. Building blocks of carbohydrates are going to be simple sugars like glucose. They call them monosaccharides: glucose, fructose. Okay. Why do you need a carbohydrate? Carbs provide energy primarily for the body. Lipids provide energy as well, but they also give us some material for making hormones. Our cell membranes are primarily lipid-based. Certain vitamins are stored in lipids. Lipids are a good insulator for heat. And then proteins, we certainly view those as structural. So anything in the body that has structure is probably protein-based. Enzymes are also protein-based. So anyhow, I don't, in your outline that you have, I put in a few other details about carbs, lipids, and proteins. You can read through those if you'd like. It's more or less FYI, but we will, again, these are terms you've heard before. So if we're going to talk about chemistry In A&P, it's probably going to be carbs, fats, and proteins. Okay. All that other stuff is too much. Nucleic acids too. That's DNA. So I did put some stuff in your outline about DNA. I'll probably ask maybe just a couple questions, but next week when we talk about the nucleus and cell division a little bit, I'll talk about DNA a little bit more. Not much. Again, next semester we spend quite a bit of time discussing DNA and protein synthesis and RNA and that type of stuff. So but I do want to mention it because it is the NA of DNA and RNA is nucleic acid. So if you see nucleic acid, just think DNA. It's already in there for you. NA, DNA, RNA. All right. If it's inorganic, it's not going to have a carbon-carbon bonds or carbon-hydrogen bonds. Inorganic is going to have everything else. Basically, we think of O2, like oxygen is considered inorganic, water, H2O, carbon dioxide, inorganic, electrolytes, right? All those, the magnesium, calcium, zinc, all of that good stuff, that's going to be inorganic. All right, we're almost done. We've got properties of water. Again, we saw the H2O molecules. Their polarity means positives at one end, negatives at the other, right? Like the North Pole and the South Pole. Polarity. What that does is it allows water to be a very good solvent. It attracts a lot of ions. Positive ions can attract to it. Negative ions can attract to it because it does have openings at both ends. Okay. High specific heat, so it allows us, in other words, it's I think 212 degrees Fahrenheit to boil water. So that's an extremely high amount of heat that we're never going to be, hopefully we won't be exposed to. Doesn't get much higher than 95 or 100 degrees. So thankfully then we won't boil up, so that's helpful. High heat of vaporization, what that means is as we sweat and water beads or sweat beads get onto the skin, what they do is they pull heat with them, and then the water droplets evaporate into the air. And as the water droplets evaporate, they're pulling and taking heat with them. They call it evaporative cooling. So your case study on Thursday gets into and talks a little bit about evaporative cooling. So keep that in mind as well, and this slide in mind when we talk about properties of water as they relate to preventing heat stroke and hyperthermia. And then there's a couple of more on there too. Again, it's the most abundant compound. All of our biochemical reactions occur in that medium. 65% or more, around 2/3 of your body is water. And again, a bulk of that water is going to be inside your cells. So cytoplasm and the water inside of your cells, that's where most of the water is stored actually in the body. They regulate body temperature again, through sweating and evaporative cooling. All right, last couple of slides and then we're done. Enzymes, I mentioned earlier, again, these are protein based. They speed up a chemical reaction. So when we need to catalyze or break something down, we add an enzyme to it and it's going to go a lot faster. So this first bullet here too is not an absolute. It's a most of the time. We stay away from absolutes. I used to say there are no absolutes, but that's an absolute statement in and of itself, right? There are no absolutes. So I say we try to stay away from absolutes in anatomy. In other words, I try not to say always and never. So for the most part, an enzyme will end in ASE. Not always. Remember, an enzyme is protein based. We're going to see as we go throughout these next couple semesters that protein derived items oftentimes end in the letters IN or INE. So it's not always that an enzyme Most of the time, though, an enzyme ends in ASE. Okay, so protease is an enzyme that breaks down proteins, for instance. Lactase, right? Lactase is an enzyme that breaks down lactose, which is certainly we know is from milk. Okay, and our cells, inside of our cells, we have a lot of different enzymes. So some of the directives that the DNA is providing, the nucleus is providing, the ribosomes and the rough ER inside of a cell involves producing specific enzymes to make sure that the cells are again able to perform protein synthesis or whatever types of chemical reactions they need to do. So my intentions are certainly not to scare you or get the cart before the horse. You do need some of a thumbnail kind of sketch of chemistry. In chapter 2 in OpenStax, it will go through maybe a little more detail, certainly on certain items. But again, if you go back to and you can find this in your syllabus too, but in this slide, you've got the 9 primary objectives that we're trying to meet. So that's what your focus is when you're watching the Padlet videos. They go right back to these. If as you read through OpenStax, they're going to relate back to these as well. And if they don't, so you're going to see stuff, I think, like I said earlier, on pH and pH balance. You can gloss over it or whatever, but I don't, I won't be asking any questions on pH or pH balance for this particular exam or this particular unit. Okay. And homeostasis, by the way, is not really part of any of the objectives. It's there's kind of like a general statement within the context of the of the course description that the state gives us. Talks about homeostasis, mentions it in there. So, but again, you need to hear it and understand what homeostasis is, at least on the surface. We're talking about balance, and that balance that the body is maintaining is done via a couple of different nervous system pathways. But in order for anything to happen in the body, homeostasis or otherwise, chemicals and chemistry are what's involved. I want to also just leave you with one last note on chemicals. As we go this semester, we'll talk occasionally, we'll mention chemicals again. Chemicals have different names in the body, obviously. But there are 3 primary, I guess, categories of chemicals. Enzymes is one of the categories. So when we start seeing a bunch of different names of chemicals in the body, we can put them under one of 3 categories typically. It's either an enzyme or it's a hormone. Okay? Enzymes, hormones, right? We all heard of hormones. In fact, we do a whole chapter right before midterm, I think week 6 or 7, on the endocrine system, which is hormones. Okay, so we're either going to have chemicals, either going to be an enzyme, a hormone, or what we call a neurotransmitter. That one you've maybe not heard of, although you've maybe heard of dopamine or serotonin or endorphins. Okay. Those are different neurotransmitters. All right. So anyway, that's your chemical introduction, I suppose, is what I'm getting at. Generally, if it's in the body and it's a chemical, it's either an enzyme, a hormone, or a neurotransmitter. Anything else is probably a carb, protein, or a fat then, right? And then, of course, vitamins, minerals, and water. So really, everything chemistry-wise breaks down to carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. Okay. And then that other stuff I mentioned, enzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, they're going to be made out of any one of these over here. Usually they're protein based. Some of them are lipid based. Some of them are carbohydrate based, or kind of a blend, glycoproteins or lipoproteins or something like that. So anyway, you're going to be faced with chemistry a little bit here and there throughout your lives, and certainly in the clinic when you take pharmacology and you start thinking about uh, um, clinically speaking how your patients are their bodies are responding to different pharmacology or not responding to pharmacology, or maybe why are they even at the clinic. Again, things a lot, almost everything goes back to chemistry and to homeostasis. So that's why you need to know at least a little bit about it today, and you'll know more about it in advanced, and certainly when you do microbiology, if you haven't already, and when you do pharmacology. So I'll leave you with that. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Um, Again, if you didn't already, make sure you put your name in the chat. And I appreciate all of your guys' hard work and joining me on these Tuesday and Thursday nights. And again, this Thursday we're going to be looking at the case study and the portfolios, and answering any questions that you might have. Yeah. Yep, thank you. Stephanie, from this week or last week? And yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but just so I know what you're shooting for. Yep, thank you, Lori. Have an awesome night. Oh, I know what you're talking about, Stephanie. Sorry. Yeah. The last one, the one about the drainage tube and the chest. So let's see. So the diaphragm, separates the cavities, the abdominal and thoracic cavities. So fluid shouldn't freely move between those two cavities. Is that what you're wondering? 'Cause I think because it asks like, um, just
Yeah, that's where I was getting at. I wasn't really sure. I mean, I think I just overthought the question, and it's hard for me because I'm a paramedic. So like I think I have like not too much, but I have some medical background, and I deal with chest tubes all the time. So I like overthought the question. I'm like, it shouldn't do that.
only if the diaphragm's torn.
Exactly, and that's what I wrote in for my answer, is if there was some sort of diaphragm like rupture or tear.
Sure.
So that's what I put in my answer, but I think I just overthought it so much that like I was like, well, shoot. I think I don't know.
No.
My gut was telling me no, and that's what I wrote.
Okay,
But
good. Usually go
I
with your
just
gut,
okay,
especially with a question about the gut, kind of.
yeah, okay.
um,
I just wanted to make sure.
both, and both parts. The nurse says that no organs were damaged. You know, the visceral, is what's right up against the organ. So like the visceral pleura, um, you know, that membrane was still intact, but you know, it doesn't mean, because I mean, it's literally like the organ is here and the viscera is here. So, you know, if you have damage out here, it still could affect the organ. I mean, you're talking like microns of, you know, measurement
Right.
in space.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if the parietal area is damaged and fluids coming in, and the visceral layers intact, it still doesn't mean that the organ wasn't damaged somehow. I mean,
Right.
you know, the dura
Okay.
mater of the brain is oftentimes still attached, even though the concussion has happened. So,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Like I said, I way overthought that question. After I answered it, it made me like, I was like, well, shoot, maybe she is right, but my gut's telling me she's not. But she's a nurse, so why would she say that if? So I
you didn't
just.
go to Gateway. No.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Steph.
All right,
Have a
bye.
good night. See you Thursday.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just waiting to see if the other two have questions before we talk.
Yeah, Aurelie or Liz, do you have any, or Ellie, I should say? Sorry, Ellie, Liz, Ellie or Aurelie, do you have? Oh, that was poetry in motion. Do you guys have any questions or concerns?
For me, not right now,
Okay,
but I'll let you
cool.
know.
All
Yeah.
right, Ellie, I appreciate it. See you Thursday. Okay, good, Aurelie. So hold on a second here. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm also